Hey VW lovers, here is a video on my 1952 standard Volkswagen Beetle. I've had this car for a little over a year now. We've done a number of things on it, at least cosmetically, to get it looking better. It had some really bad paint issues when we got the car. We've addressed those for the most part so that the car at least looks a lot better now. At some point we'll probably go and do a full restoration on this car, but for now it's a pretty good looking solid driver, and I do drive this car quite a bit. So the color of this car is called pearl gray, which I think is one of Volkswagen's best colors they ever had. To me it's so sort of German looking, this kind of drab gray color. It's very kind of World War II, I don't know, German looking, really, like I said earlier. The cool thing with the standards though is that they did have some paint accents that I think make them kind of stand out, with the painted bumpers, for example. So you can see the stripe on the bumper. So the Deluxe cars, which would have had chrome bumpers, also had some paint accents like this, but to me they stood out a lot less on chrome bumpers, for example. The trim color on this is sealing wax red, which is of course a great Volkswagen color. So you can see on the standard Volkswagen there's no aluminum trim work on the outside to speak of. Even the handles that you see are non-polished, non-chrome. They're just raw aluminum. The horn grills, which everyone's familiar with, that sort of sit here and here, are absent on these cars. Again, Volkswagen's attempt to save a few bucks in manufacturing these. So because there's no horn grill, the horn actually sat on the outside of the bumper. There was a special mount built onto the bumper bracket that the horn mounted on these cars. So this car originally was sold in Germany. So this is a domestic model versus an export model. So a lot of the export models that came to the US and other countries, they actually dressed up the standards a little bit. So a lot of them, for example, that came to the US, they would go ahead and put chrome bumpers on them and some other little odds and ends like that to try and make them look a little more presentable to that audience, in the US, for example. But the German domestic ones were about as stripped down as you can get. Pretty much everything was either painted or raw on these cars. Again, it was a way for them to save money and to sell the car a little cheaper. So a regular Beetle would have been, say, $1,500 back then. This car would have been probably $150 or so less. And so for that $150 or so less, you're not getting a lot of the trim along the side and the hood. Again, the handles and so on were just raw, unpainted. You can see the dash itself is also kind of more plain, and instead of the nice ivory looking colored pods and so on here, everything was just sort of black and very drab. No trim around the glove boxes, very basic looking steering wheel, etc. The headliner on a standard is in the center only. So as you probably know, on regular Beetles, the headliner kind of goes down the pillars, all down in this area. It's around the back window and so on. On the standard, it was pretty much just in the middle. So again, a way of cutting cost. The other thing is these cars, again, for cost cutting, was they didn't even have a driver's side sun visor. So make sure you got some sunglasses with you when you're driving this car, if the sun is getting low. The interior, I should point out, on this car is actually not correct. This was done by a previous owner. This is actually Deluxe interior. You can see with the pinstripes and the piping around the edges. So at some point I'll put the correct interior in this car. It's a different fabric, different color, no piping. It's just sort of smooth, and again, anything they could do to cut cost on these cars, they did. And that's how they got the price down on them. So yeah, this one needs some things corrected like that, but for now I'm just basically enjoying driving the car. If you're interested, take a look. I released a video last night on how to drive a non-synchro crash box car. That's actually this car. And what that means, if you're not familiar with it, is The transmissions did not have any synchros in it. So anytime you shifted, you had to basically get the transmission and the motor spinning at the same speed so the gears didn't grind. So you do something called double clutching. You can look that up on my other video if you're interested and you're not sure what that is. I kind of explained it in there. The other thing with this car was, being a standard, again, in spirit of saving money, is it had cable actuated brakes. So no hydraulics at all on this car. The brakes, basically when you push the pedal, it pushes a rod that pulls some cables. It's kind of similar to how the emergency brakes work on the back of a Volkswagen, except there's a cable essentially like that that runs to all four wheels. And so the funny thing with these cars is when you set the emergency brake, it actually locks all four wheels instead of just the rear. So kind of a neat little thing about these cars. Let's walk around the back of this baby here. So when I got the car, they had all of the exterior handles were painted in body color. The front headlight rings were painted in body color. The rims were just solid pearl gray. The bumpers didn't have the accents on. So those are some of the things I did, trying to get the car looking more like it would have been delivered with again, those accents on them. Some of these cars actually had, where the trim goes along the body here, actually had a stripe in that same color painted along there. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, even though it's probably correct for this car. We'll maybe address that later when we do a full restoration on this car. But for now, I'm really happy with how it looks with the pearl gray and the sealing wax red accents. Let's go around the back here. So unfortunately, the motor for this car is not numbers matching to the car, but it is a 25 horsepower motor. It's about a year later, so it's a 53 engine case, but for the most part, it has all the correct details on it as far as the air cleaner, the distributor, which somebody has clocked wrong. I need to fix that. The wires should be facing out toward the back instead of to the side. But yeah, other than that, you know, most of the right pieces are there. I just probably need to pull this motor out and detail it. It looks just awful, but again, most of the hard to find pieces are there. The start coils there, it's the right carburetor, etc., the right voltage regulator. So other than looking terrible, it actually runs pretty good, and again, those hard to find bits are pretty much there. So at some point I'll address that. I may just wait until we do a full restoration of the car. Again, it runs and drives great. This is, out of my three cars, this is probably, I'd say, my favorite to drive, just because it's so slow and so primitive. Again, 25 horsepower motor, full crash box transmission. You have to double clutch every gear. The cable actuated brakes, which, needless to say, don't stop as well as hydraulic brakes, so you kind of have to be a little bit more aware when you're driving the car about speeds and distances. The good thing is, with 25 horsepower, you're really not ever moving that fast that stopping is much of an issue. I should point out the wheels on this car are actually the correct riveted 16-inch wheels. Those are pretty hard to find, so luckily all four and the spare are the right wheels for this car. And these are bias ply tires that the car would have come with. The funny thing is with the cable brakes, I think they do stop pretty decent. Again, you have to apply more pedal pressure than with hydraulic brakes, but I think what really limits the stopping ability of this car are these skinny bias ply tires. When you start stepping on the brakes pretty hard, these tires actually start complaining pretty quick. So I think what ultimately would limit how fast you can stop in this car is not the cable brakes, it's really these bias ply tires, which are pretty fun to drive on, but they do complain a lot. The traction is pretty bad. So probably a pretty good match to 25 horsepower and cable brakes. You don't really need more tire than that because those things can't really handle it. But overall, just a really, really fun car to drive, even compared to my race car, the red one I've done a video on before, which has, I don't know, 5 or 10 times more power than this car. It's still, this thing is just such a joy to drive. You're not getting anywhere fast in a car like this, but you know you're going to get there. And the driving experience is very engaging because, again, you're having to double clutch everything. you're having to, you know, kind of plan a little bit better with braking and so on. The semaphores do work on this car, and I do use them in traffic, even though most people probably don't notice them. I do it more for my own enjoyment. I did put flashing bulbs in the semaphores, so those make me happy. Again, I don't know if anyone notices them or not, but here, let's actually turn the power on and show the semaphores real quick. So here we go. This baby turned on, and the switch, instead of being on the stock on split windows, is actually in the middle of the dash. So you rotate this rotary knob to the left and the semaphore comes on. Actually, I'm sorry, this car I don't have flashing bulbs on yet. I was thinking of my other car. So these just come on and illuminate like this, which I think probably makes them even less effective, because nobody really knows what this funny little arm sticking out of a Volkswagen means. I think on my other car, the red one, where they're blinking, it's probably a little bit more obvious what they are, but that's okay. It's all part of the fun of these cars. You can see the light right here illuminated, showing that the semaphore is on. Let's go ahead and fire this car up. You don't actually start these cars with the key. There's a button almost hidden under the dash right here that starts it. Let's see if this thing will cooperate and start. There you go. Give her a little rev. To me, there's nothing like the sound of a 25 horsepower Volkswagen. It's just a really great sound. I could listen to this all day. It just sounds so old and primitive. I just love it. The funny thing is with these carburetors on these cars is they don't actually have an accelerator pump, for those of you that know what that means. But, you know, they work surprisingly well, and the car is surprisingly fairly responsive in terms of the throttle. You wouldn't really think it would be without an accelerator pump, but it was just engineered and designed so well that it really works, even with that very basic carburetor, which doesn't have anything really except well, it does have a choke. It has a manual choke, and so if you haven't started the car for a while, you have to use the choke to get it started, and then it fires right up. If the car's been driven within the past few days, like right now, you don't even have to use the choke, and it'll fire right up just like it did. So yeah, just a really fun car. Again, I think this is probably my favorite car out of my three right now. Super fun to drive, and I think it's kind of unique looking because you don't see that many standards. They've just got such a stripped down, primitive look to them that I just think they're really neat, and I actually prefer them over Deluxes. Just again, the overall look, I think, to me is so cool. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. I know this was kind of a long video, so thanks for the people who stuck it out to the end. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to post them. Thanks for watching.